I think, the quickest way to get started is just by taking action, being willing to test things, being willing to learn, be curious, and actually go through the process. Nothing should ever deter you, no matter how much change is going on in the market. It's just important to pay attention to where those shifts are happening and then adjust with the right information and making sure that you understand what's going on. That way you can better prepare yourself and start low. You don't need to go big on the first day. You can actually start small, get a good understanding. And then once you're comfortable, then you can have some explosive growth and actually try these risky things or do these incredible campaigns.
You're listening to Ecomonics, a Debutify podcast, your resource for one-of-a-kind insights into the world of e-commerce and business in the modern age. This is Joseph. I'll be presenting a wealth of industry knowledge from interviews with successful business people and our own state-of-the-art research. Your time is valuable, so let's go. Chase Chappell, it is good to have you here on Ecomonics. How you doing today? How you feeling?
Feeling great. It's beautiful outside. I have a cow view. I can see the wonderful green happening. Summer's almost here.
Lovely. Yeah. Summer is pretty much here. I'm here in Toronto, Canada. Whereabouts are you?
Dallas, Texas.
Dallas, Texas. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. There's
So we're already hitting like 90s.
There's a number of places that I suppose I fantasize about moving to because I consider myself like a closet American. Like Florida, Texas, basically anywhere that's open up right now is super appealing to me. Yeah. So there's that. I might ask you a bonus question towards the end if you just want to tell us something fun about Texas or Dallas. So we'll get to that.
Awesome.
I also wanted to say before I lob my, I was about to say hit you with my opening question. I don't know, that's been seemed almost too assertive to my liking. But before I lob my opening question to you, I also wanted to say I always do probably like 30 minutes, 40 minutes worth of prep just so that I see it or I understand as much of my guests as I can going in. And I've been doing this show for about a year and I'm continually, I guess, in awe of the scope of e-commerce.
Yeah.
I don't know how many more companies I'm going to come across working at the level that a company such as yours is working at, but there's going to be another, and there's going to be another after that, and it's hard for me to quantify, and that's coming from somebody who spent the last year trying. So right. I just wanted to, I guess, make that known because that's where my mind is at. So with that, tell us what you do and what you're up to these days.
Yeah. I mean, essentially right now, I run an agency. We have nearly 20 people on our team. We manage Facebook ads, Google ads, TikTok ads, and do all of the media buying. We don't do any creative. We manage over 10 million in spend there. And then I have, a training company where I teach people how to do the Facebook ads and, advise on over $185 million there in spend. And so I'll end up showing people how to actually set up the campaigns and focus on a more data approach rather than, the latest, greatest strategy. It's more or less about like understanding numbers, reading the data, and really understanding everything. And then also I'm launching Surge, which is a software company that we're about to release, and it's going through beta. And currently, it's one of those things that's really going to help out with the whole iOS 14 and being able to track and attribute things more accurately, given that, a lot of the curtains have now been pulled back. So that way people can use it as a, analyzation tool and optimize their campaigns when they're running, actual Facebook ads, Google ads, and TikTok ads.
So is Surge, I did look at it, and at the time of this recording, it's in beta. So was it being developed specifically to respond to this issue?
Yes. And as a tool that we can, it's made, we're marketers and, we built it for marketers. So the dashboard is meant to feel seamless whenever you actually get access to it and being able to like, hey, I've ran Facebook ad campaigns. This is very similar. And they can actually see their data, see where all the sources are coming from and, integrate it with Shopify, integrate it with TikTok, Google, and all their campaigns to have all of their data in one place in one dashboard. So that way they can actually see truly where the, actual results are coming from. Because sometimes people will click, on Facebook the first time, but then they convert on Google. Google gets the last touch attribution, and then Facebook isn't even picking up that data. Well, ours is going to give us, transparency and say, hey, the first person actually came from Facebook. That's where they were acquired. They just so happened to purchase after they searched you guys.
And one thing I can see as an advantage to this as well, is that it would, I think, encourage sellers to be more open-minded about other platforms and maybe they're not advertising on. I think one of the main reasons why somebody picks a platform such as Facebook is to be able to collect and use that data. And so by having the data in all these different sources, aside from the mess of having 12 different dashboards, it's also difficult, I think, to understand and analyze that data, because it's like several different languages, or one language, different
Absolutely.
dialects. So for all of that
Yes.
to be condensed into that also seems like a bit of a challenge to understand how each platform is speaking to the seller, and also the different mindsets that consumers are in. One thing that I've learned over the course of this is, you understand the intentions change from platform to platform. Facebook, this is my opinion, but in my opinion, Facebook is a discovery platform. People just kind of scroll just to get their dopamine hits. Google is an intent platform, searching for answers, but not necessarily a buy. Amazon is, I'm looking for something I'm willing to pay as soon as I get the solution to my problem.
I would definitely agree with that. I mean, it does go both ways, because I mean, let's say you're hungover and now you want to search a hangover remedy, and then all of a sudden you find something in response for that. But there's, predominantly exactly what you said is the case. Yes, I totally agree.
You mentioned that this is in response to really the big thing that we wanted to talk about on the show today. And to my audience who have been listening to each episode so far, thank you. Email us, and I'll send you a coffee or something. But the last person that we spoke to about this issue was Christian Leverstich of Leverstich Media, and so our audience and myself we are somewhat aware of it, but I imagine that there's been more to the story since then. So I'll just let you know what I'm aware of in broad strokes. The details are somewhat beyond my capacity, to be perfectly honest. Is Facebook? My understanding is that Facebook, Apple, wants to have more of a curated experience for their users. They don't want their users to have their data sent to Facebook. So there's a barrier being put up, which means that Facebook advertisers are struggling at best to be able to collect the data from Apple users, which, depending on what product and what niche you're in, is a pretty significant could be a significant part of the target market. So that's everything I've got so far. So you can let us know what's the situation or what needs to be clarified as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's essentially what's going on. I mean, like you said, Apple wants to be more privacy driven for that, all the Apple users, which is totally fair. Everybody deserves privacy. And especially, if it's not private, you don't want your data in the wrong hands of the wrong person. But at the end of the day, what's happening is they're saying, here's Facebook who wants to have access to this information. But their question is, why do they even need access to it? What's the purpose of them having it other than to sell users' data? Well, the one thing they want to do is ensure that the data goes back into the hands of the actual business. If you're selling a product, you have to know who that person is, and you have to know their address, because you have to make that product for them and ship it to them. So of course you need that information, and Apple's not worried about that. They're worried about other people having their hands in it. So that's where, we're really also coming into play here, because we want to say, okay, the small business owner, the average business owner should have the decision to do what they want with the data, as long as their, policies are intact with, all of the users who use their site accept to it. And then they should be able to send the data where they want. And so when you have a third-party tracking come in, you can actually have that information forwarded to, actually track appropriately. And you can still use the same optimizations as you once would, on Facebook, which is where, Surge is really coming into play here. But at the end of the day, with all this stuff that's happening and you can't see all this information, Facebook's still combating it by actually having a predictive algorithm, because they've been doing this for years. And they're able to actually, predict whether or not a user is going to have a high purchase intent, and if they're actually going to make the purchase on the actual site. So there's a good chance that the system could predict it wrong, but there's also, a higher chance that it's going to be much more accurate than not. So the good thing is you can still get results attributed. You just might not know exactly which audience or which person who it was that actually made that purchase or where they originally came from. So there's a couple things you can do. The conversion API, if somebody has an ad blocker, doesn't matter, the conversion API is going to track it. The other thing is UTM source tracking, which essentially means that as long as somebody makes the purchase or submits their lead information, that, URL string, which is going to tell you their campaign, their, audience, and the ad they came from. So that way you can know on your actual, end. So if you have Shopify, you can actually pull this report in the marketing reports and say, hey, they actually came from this platform. Doesn't track it 100%, but it's certainly better than not tracking at all. And then, the other things are actually just being compliant, actually verifying your domain, going through the hoops and jumps of making sure you've done all these things. Because if you don't, Facebook's now having to, actually limit you, stop you from running ads, and you have to stick to one conversion value. So just making sure you're doing all the right steps and actually doing what most of these companies are asking, because one, it's good for the user, and two, you want to do that because you don't want to be prevented, from running ads and so forth.
And I think it also speaks to a more broad-reaching issue where when I think dropshipping reached its apex of prominence, the standard by which these companies should operate was non-existent. Somebody could sell a product and then not ship it, close the website down,
yes.
take a bunch of money and run. So I don't know. Maybe it's just because I haven't put too much skin into it. So, my opinion comes from more of the outsider's perspective, at least for now, which is as I see these standards increasing, it says to me, well, these are kind of the standards that should have been in there in the first place. This is how business operates through tangibility and accountability. So when I see this, another thing that I guess a disconnect that I face is how much of the information for any given user is attributed to Facebook, regardless of what device they're using it on. So, for instance, I use Facebook on my Samsung, an Android device. I also use Facebook on my browser, and a lot of my input is there on my account. So I guess what I don't really understand is how much of a significant difference it really makes on what device I'm using, and how marketers have to look for that quantifiable data versus the data that should be on Facebook just on an account basis.
Yeah, from an optimization standpoint, it's good to know which one you're converting on. So like you might, discover something on your phone, but you might enjoy purchasing on your desktop. So that's good information to know which device you're purchasing from. But in terms of tracking, it's all going to end up at the same road. We're going to know, period, which device you're on, because if you're logged in on both platforms, now we have both of your user information. And secondly, as soon as you go to a site, as long as somebody has a pixel on there, they're going to be able to pick that device up, and then that's saved forever as long as you're browsing the web. Any site you go to with a Facebook pixel, they're knowing exactly where you're going, what you're looking at, which is also self-adding you to these interest groups for advertisers. And so, whether you're on your phone or not, the ads are still going to end up showing up in both cases. It's just a matter of, on the other side, if you're going to optimize for that, you want to know, is the user purchasing on the phone or are they purchasing on desktop? Because if they discover you on your phone, then that's great. But if they're actually converting on a desktop, you want to make sure you're optimized on that view. But, or the other end, maybe you only purchase on your phone and you discover on your desktop. So you want to make sure that the site's optimized, it's converting properly, you have everything in place. And then as well as the ads can look totally different on two devices. So, right now, Reels and all of these different things are really hot. So you want to make sure your placements for stories, Reels, TikTok are all in those vertical formats, because those are what, where all the attention is right now currently. So like if you're, not in these formats, a lot of times you're not even delivering to these placements.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. Like, say for instance, if I'm not creating any, having looked at the Facebook Business Manager and the different ad campaigns. So, for anybody who hasn't done this yet, your format can change in several different ways. So you create one thing. Okay, you have your desktop format, you have your iPhone format, you have the vertical format, which I believe you mentioned. So that helps clear that up, and it actually expands on it in a couple of ways too, because I think it also speaks to even what I had mentioned earlier is if they're an Apple user, they're part of the Apple target market. Which I believe, and I actually think I might be wrong about this, but it slightly increases the chances that they might own a Tesla, which actually
mine delivers Saturday.
Oh yeah, congratulations!
I own all Apple, and that probably stands right.
Yeah, I've only heard that they're a smooth ride, but I've yet to be picked up by.
I've never been in one, so I'll find out this weekend.
Yeah, well, you got my email. I'm curious to hear about it. Okay, and so actually, I guess this is how I want to frame it. Is I always want to hear more along the lines of like what personal experiences, or from the perspective of your company, the experiences or how this has impacted you. So, one question is, if from your experience, is an event like this unprecedented? Were there warning signs, and then also, like, was it a nightmare? Was it more just like, oh, all right, I guess I'm going to switch this around?
These events have been happening every year. This one just seems more predominantly talked about because there's more advertisers than there's ever been. And a lot of people have relied on data for a while. And this is the first time where there's been a more significant pullback, but there's been significant pullbacks plenty of times. I've been doing this for 7 years now, and back when the whole Cambridge Analytica scandal happened, we all had a lot of us larger agencies had access to the same data they did. They're just the ones that were ringed up as the poster child for doing things the wrong way. But a lot of us had the same access of information. They were just using it in a different way than others were. And that information was, like, you could literally pull up a profile of somebody and see their entire logged history of what they were doing. And so, like, you could use that data to your advantage and come up with, insane audiences. You could target race, you could target ethnicity, you could target all kinds of different things. And then they switch that, they pull back that curtain. They say, hey, no more of this targeting. Now, if you want to target anybody, they're going to say, hey, it's an affinity. So this person acts like this, specific ethnic background, which, is the new gauge for targeting. And they end up taking away a lot of audiences then. And then they also pulled back on who can have access to certain information in the API, because you could pull a whole log of people's information and, mine it. You would have everybody's profile information. So they're like, no more of that. And so there's even times before that, back when, before there was even video, there was, what would happen is you would launch an image online and it would take you out of the app on Facebook and to your website. You know how much time you can get somebody to stay on your website if they're not even opening it in app? If you actually leave that entire app altogether and land on somebody's site, the amount of time somebody's going to spend on your site is going to go up, and you're going to make way more money. That's why email lists are good, because it's getting them out of the app and going to the site, right? Which you get those great conversions. Whereas on Facebook now, back then, before they even had the video ads, they made this switch. And so many companies figured out, hey, we could build a $2, $3, $5, $10 million business on Facebook ads for literally like $10,000 a month. It was absolutely ridiculous. Millions of users, you could ping to your site. Literally, here's what happened. That was all of their ad revenue. That was all of everything they relied on. And as soon as Facebook said, hey, instead of us making people leave our app, why don't we just keep them on our app and open the website? And if they don't want to be on the website anymore, or as soon as they're done purchasing, then continue scrolling. And their, engagements went way up. But this absolutely annihilated a huge amount of businesses. And nobody's talking about this because it was such a long time ago. But if you look this back up, there's so many businesses that went out of business that got crushed online. There wasn't, any big Amazon stuff happening yet. So like all of these businesses got, 75, 80% of the revenue cut literally within days. I mean, it was absolutely insane. And they couldn't even get their, site to optimize, because now it's loading within somebody's app. And with the speeds back then, you got to imagine you're running the back end of Facebook, plus you're loading a site on top of it. So it was a huge issue, and that crushed businesses. I wouldn't even consider that as severe as what's happening now with iOS 14. I think it's just putting up a barrier to entry now. Because now people won't be able to get a lot of data. So what they're having to do is like do all this, these nonsense campaigns like link clicks and traffic and engagements just to get information. And then they have to start moving up the ladder, which ends up costing you way more than just being able to jump straight to conversions now. Because when people launch an ad account, now what they're having to do is actually get purchases before they can even do a purchase conversion campaign, which is already a big barrier to entry, because you throw up a conversion campaign day one, you could see a purchase, no problem. And it would start optimizing. Now, Facebook doesn't even have as much data as they once had access to on your site because of this opt-out, that you're now having to force yourself to spend more money just to get the information you need. So it's, right. We see this every year. I think this one just might be more talked about than, previous ones.
Right. Well, I do my best not to bring COVID-19 into the conversation unless I feel it's relevant. And I feel like it is relevant in this case, because we're talking about an unprecedented event that doesn't happen every year.
Yes.
It massively expanded the need for e-commerce, and not just on the demand side, but also on the supply side. Hundreds, if not tens of thousands of new sellers emerged because they were running a business and they needed to adapt. Otherwise they were going to go out of business, or they lost their jobs. They lost their way of life. And then they needed something to start bringing in revenue. And it's amazing to see, I guess, the inherent economic strength of both the buyers and the sellers is that there's enough people willing to take the risks, but there's also enough people willing to make these purchases as well. I get like this is the first that I've heard of these. Actually, I just want you to also help me clarify what year this was. The in-app purchases where it was trying to load the websites within Facebook. What was the time frame for that exactly?
Yeah, I don't have an exact year, because I mean it was right when I started, but it was in like 2013, 14, or 16. It's one of these time frames, but that's when I first started out. And like we were running ads before videos. They didn't even have video. Can you imagine Facebook without videos now? It'd be crazy.
Well, I'm a 31-year-old millennial. I remember Facebook before video. I remember Facebook before it was dynamic. Because initially Facebook was more like a living, breathing yearbook, where it was just about preserving memories. Yes. Where you'd say, "Oh, here's the photos from the semi-formal dance," and this was fun. Yeah, great. All right, well, see you guys in class. Nice. For sometimes I'll have this trip through memory lane where I will open up a message history from somebody that I hadn't contacted since those times. I can actually see a change in behavior when somebody sends a message expecting it to be received right away versus at that time it was basically an extension of your email inbox. So I say, it was great studying with you, and good luck. And that was like, so just a quick nostalgia there for Facebook of all things, but. When you're describing this to me, the disconnect is that from the premise, this would actually increase conversions because it reduces the time for the consumer to go through the remainder of the funnel. If the product is there right away, that is I think the swiftest somebody can make the decision to make the purchase, and it's not like the website is being left out in the dark. You still have the opportunity to present
you're referring
your brand.
to the product being on Facebook for purchase. Yeah, the Facebook shopping.
Right. Maybe because I'm kind of like using my imagination here to picture a situation that doesn't it's not occurring at the moment, but that somebody would be trying to load a different website while they're on Facebook. And so to me, this seems like, well, that's a quicker way to convert, not counting Facebook shopping. But in actuality, it turned out to crush businesses. And I think that is a sign that this particular feature was probably too early, and that if it had the ability to convert and load swiftly now, that might do a lot better.
Yeah. And certainly it took time for people to figure out the whole speed thing, but a lot of it was to do with the, internet barrier.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that just accessing it altogether or
loading, load times. Yeah. Everybody's internet connections just weren't there yet. We have, 1,000 gigabyte download speeds within a second. You could load 10 movies in a fraction of a second in some cities. It's absolutely crazy. Back then, it'd take hours.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole documentary there in the waiting of just all of the different ways people have had to interact with it. Now, I have an interesting question for you, which is, over time you see these different these I want to call it event horizon because I just like calling it that, but I don't think that's really what it's called. It's just these different events, these different situations, and what fundamentals remain for businesses that have been able to weather these storms and survive these and continue to ideally be profitable, but given some of the circumstances, just stay afloat?
There are pillars, and there always is. And, the people who get, totally knocked out or totally, prevented from ever able to do something, they wouldn't have survived to begin with long term, because there's always something that's going to happen every year. So you need a strong structural business to be able to handle these things. And, some of these pillars are one, having an outstanding offer. At the end of the day, any great offer is going to, you're going to be able to actually drive conversions with the data without it, because eventually if you're just showing it to enough people, you're going to get conversions because it's something that, individuals actually want. It's a too good to be true offer. Like, for instance, if you have, your closest competitor is priced at 25, but you're priced at 10. Like, that's the second best pricing option is 25. Everybody's going to want to opt for that $10, value. There's no other competition even in that price range. It's not like they're $1 more. I mean, we're talking about a $15, dollar split difference. So like, that's, a good offer will allow you to stay ahead of the competition. Now, the other thing is creative, being able to communicate with your audience. There's different generations, people respond to different things, as well as there's subcategories within all of that. Everybody's different. So you have to have very unique messaging. So it's always good to call out your audience, because if you can't specifically figure out how to target them or have the data to target them, then you need to figure out who your person is and then just say that through the actual line. Let's say that, you're looking to go after mothers. Well, you can actually straight up put that in your ad text and say, hey, mothers, and then, talk about what it is that you're selling, the product, the value that it comes with. And then that creative speaks to them because you're calling out the mothers. Dads aren't going to really respond to that, and kids aren't either, because it's not addressing them. So that captures the attention of your audience for you when they actually see it. The other thing outside of the creative and the offer is actually just having a very good product, something that's actually has quick ship times, good experience, good customer service. People really enjoy using it, has a lot of value. And, it's something that they end up referring to their friends. They say, hey, buy this, because that's going to end up spreading word of mouth as well. So like those are three main things. And, the whole experience with all that is included with it. But, those are the real solid pillars you need. And then the rest of it is really analyzing data, understanding who, what it is that's making somebody convert, and optimizing and tweaking all these other parts to get, max efficiencies out of everything.
One thing I'm wondering about, well, because with your example with advertising to moms specifically, is if, you've seen success in advertising adjacent to. So say, for instance, if a product is really good for a mother, it's not always the case that the mother is going to buy the product. Sometimes it's the husband that buys a product, or the son that buys a product. And then, of course, you got Mother's Day as a significant event for that. So
yes.
Have you seen that a turnaround effectively, where it's like, hey, sons, here's the product that your mother would really like?
So you wouldn't address the other side of the audience. You just wouldn't address them, period. It would just be the product, because, you have spouses that'll buy, you have family that'll buy, you have cousins that'll buy for them, friends, lots of people will buy for, a product and then give it as a gift, or, get it for somebody, or they're thinking about them, or they had a conversation about it over dinner and they're like, oh, there it is, I'm gonna buy that for them. So like, yes, 100%. A lot of times people get hung up on the idea that their product is specifically for, say it's ladies only. Well, it might be for ladies only, but you got to think other people are thinking about them too. So they're going to buy that product as well. So you're automatically excluding an audience that could actually purchase that product, even though they might not necessarily use it themselves. So without a doubt, you want to go, more broad with your targeting, but your messaging can be more specific.
And that's an issue that, even I'm facing right now in the position that I'm in, because I have no problem revealing what product I'm working on right now. But you've ever seen it, these drawers you stick underneath your desk, allows you to put stationery in there, makes the desk space much more convenient and efficient. I like it. I've got a few attached to my desk already.
Yeah, there you go.
And I remember being asked, like, what's my target market for it? And I hesitated because I knew the answer was unisex, but it almost seemed like it was too broad. And I by not narrowing it down to a more specific audience, I was actually doing myself a disservice.
Yeah, and like the ways you can find that out is like you can hit these work from home audiences, and you can adjust your your messaging. Like work from home can be a clutter once you're actually staying home full time from the office. People used to go into the office, they'd have the desk, they'd have all their stuff organized. They get home, they have a desk, but not everything's organized. So the whole work from home thing, you can appeal to that side, and you just keep going after those different segments and different groups for those people who like it. There might be organization, people who are absolutely fanatics about organizing, and they have all these organizers and they buy every damn organizer they see online. And so that's also an audience, because they own 50 of them, but gosh, they do want that 51st one. They want to try it out. Then you have people who review things. Then you have, individuals who will buy it and won't even use it for their desk. They're going to go stick it in their kid's room, or they're going to buy it and give it to a friend. There's so many different categories. That's why it can be so broad. But at the same time, you can have these sub markets where you're like, hey, predominantly 80% of my audience is definitely work from home people who struggle with, keeping organized after they left their office. And then 20% is, parents thinking about their kids because they think their kids are just a bunch of clumsy, throw it everywhere kind of person.
Man, I gotta say, I love doing this show. I get so much great mentoring advice. But I also want to make sure that I'm asking this in a way that's parallel to my audience's journey, because they're trying to solve the same problems that I'm trying to solve. So, bearing in mind the issue that we've been talking about with iOS 14.5. So, for people who are they're about to get onto Facebook, and I guess the question can actually be broken down into a couple of components. One of them is Facebook advertising an ideal starting point at this point? Should people be looking into a different platform as a starting point? To me, my understanding is that Facebook is the great place to start. It's kind of like the battlefield. It's where you go to cut your teeth, and then there are other platforms to branch out into. That's my understanding of it. But
there's a couple $100 billion of commerce going through this thing every single year. I mean, it's the key place to start. You can start for less than what it costs you to buy a Starbucks coffee. Most people spend $5 to $6 on a coffee every day. I mean, you could spend less money on ads and actually run a profitable business. So, I mean, absolutely. It has the most data, it has the most information on it. They've been, tracking their users the longest. No other social media platform is keeping up with so many different little behaviors. So absolutely great place to start. super low barrier to entry in terms of, actually what you have to spend. If you want to get on TikTok today, well, you're going to have to be spending at minimum of 20. Then you're going to have to cost cap your item. So if you don't even know what your, cost per acquisition is, let's say you've never tested it. Well, if you go to TikTok, they're just going to spike your cost. And then you're going to have such a high barrier to entry that you're going to be dropping a couple $100s before you ever see the light and day of a single purchase. And that's not sustainable for any business. And then on search, it's so competitive because, the auction system is built off of impression share. So how many, allowed people are searching for the specific term. And then all these bigger companies are eating up that, those first few spaces. So you'd have to spend an arm and a leg just to actually serve, perfectly to actually get a lot of people to convert. Whereas on Facebook, you can be as broad as possible and still be able to, have a good chance against the big guys, because if you have a good creative, if you have a fast loading website, if you have a solid product, you can outcompete these other people because you can get offer, an actual better product at a better price and get a lot of good impressions and actually reach people to convert. So certainly Facebook is still the place to go. It's just, you have to move with the change, stay updated with the times, and adapt to these things. Otherwise, the business won't always survive.
And one thing that I found encouraging, even from earlier on in our conversation, is, what are the main pillars that keep a business afloat through all the I was about to try to invent a word like tumultuous, but tumultuosity. I don't know. I think it's got legs, but through all of this tumultuous uncertainty, it's like you'd have to try to overthink this. Quality product, quality customer service, a brand that means what they say.
Yeah. And that's on the marketing and sales side. Of course, there's good operations people who know logistics, who know how to get crazy fast ship times, who know how to work down the price where they have incredible margins, where they can actually spend a lot of money to acquire customers, who actually know how to build secondary products on their primary ones to get those upsells and added profit value and to actually keep their customers retained, who know all those subscription models. I mean, you can be a wizard at a lot of different things, but on the marketing and sales side, if you just have those main pillars, you're going to have, a higher chance of success than not. I mean, you could be fantastic at logistics, but if you don't know how to get somebody in front of yourself to buy the product, what's even the purpose of it? So I mean, it really has to go hand in hand. But at the same time, you can get sales with these main ones to begin with before you have to figure out all the other back end stuff.
So one thing I jotted down as a note from the very beginning, once you had described what you do and what you're up to, is that so creative is not handled within your company. So creative is largely on the client side. So one thing I don't have a clear picture of is, I guess, the barrier for entry for clients to want to work with you. Small businesses, they only get bigger. And it's been a pretty consistent pattern is that, you do have to have some established capital and some momentum going before most agencies are going to put the energy on it. I don't know if that's an exception with you guys. So
yeah, the average business now with us is spending anywhere between 30,000 and 100 grand per month. We'll usually take clients within the 50K plus range monthly ad spend. Because that way there's enough information there for us to come in and really scale that business pretty drastically. Or they're already, a large company. Like for instance, we had this company come in and they're the number one seller in their category in all of these retail locations. They have extreme wide distribution, are selling in all these different places, but their brand awareness is, in last place in their category. So nobody knows about them, but they're the biggest seller in their space. So how could that even happen, right? Well, it's primarily because they're not doing any online advertising. They've grown their business through distribution, through having that wide network and people trying their product out and then people loving it and coming back. Well, online, they just launched their e-commerce business because after COVID, all these retail stores were closed. They're like, this is the first time in history where we've been running our business and have ever had an issue. We'll sell $1 billion this year. But after COVID, they're like, what do? We got to go to e-com. And so they don't know what to do, but they have the budgets for it. And now we're helping them create their budget, these $1 million budgets. So that way they can get their brand out there and have a sustainable online business to protect them from the downsides of, these extreme things that nobody would even expect are going to happen.
So what's the relationship with working with them and their ideas? Because I can't imagine that you have like no input or no impact rather on the creative that they're presenting, because it is part of your ability to scale their brand.
Yes, it's a lot. We give a lot of times the creatives do not like us because we'll say, hey, that might look pretty, but here's the thing. We need it to convert. It needs to be direct. We need to have these, actions here. We need this verbiage. And a lot of times they're, taking that as an insult to their creativity, which yes, it is beautiful. It looks super cool. But at the end of the day, people aren't going to buy from that thing. We have to have it look a specific way. We need product front and center. We need the backgrounds to be fluid. We want it to be on brand. The logo needs to be in this specific corner. All these little fine details add up to the overall conversion picture. So a lot of times, we'll make a lot of creative recommendations, which is good for the brand because now they actually know what they need to do. And we're providing insight. We're saying, hey, here's the colors that are converting for you on the background. Here's where the product placements are converting for you. Now, those two, constants need to stay at play here. All the other stuff, we'll leave the creativity up to you at that point. So that way they can still get variation and, new feel to the overall brand, but while staying on that actual conversion, rule book. So, we do have a lot of consulting on the creative side. We just don't create it in-house ourselves.
Here's one thing that I tend to scratch my head of regarding creative, because, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook. It's lucky that I can justify it nowadays by saying, well, I'm just giving my my eye on what ads are. And I notice the what I call it's those dropshippy ads. They always seem like they paid somebody on Fiverr like $23.99 to have the ad, and there's the music, and they use the footage they got from Alibaba or AliExpress, and I see it pretty consistently, and I sound like I'm knocking it, which is probably because I am. But I'm making those ads too. Those are the ones that I have being workshopped right now. So I'm not immune to it whatsoever. And then there's this other pillar of ads where this brand will just come out of nowhere, but it'll have such its own foundation that it seems to have the capacity to take on the entire industry. So for instance, right now, there's this ad running all over the place called Dr. Squanch, which is these soap bars, which I'm this close to getting, by the way. I haven't been let down by goat's milk, but like it's hard not to want to buy that product because it's everywhere and it seems like it's the perfect product for the perfect fit. And it seems to me that those two pillars. Now, have you been able to, are you working in both of these areas? And if so, is there a more, I guess, equitable and fair way to quantify them?
Yeah, that's disruptive advertising for sure. When you have somebody where there's a space where there's history of people having ads who have successfully built businesses there, and a business model where you think like, soap has been taken over, it's controlled in the industry, just like in the car business. Who would have thought that, Tesla would blow up all of a sudden in an industry that seemed like they had a massive grip on it? Well, it's disruptive advertising for, that's, you said it was Squatch Bar, Dr. Squatch?
Dr. Squatch, yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Squatch. And that's because they're doing really innovative, disruptive advertising, which is like having, a main character and telling a story and, being really explosive with their creatives and being really unique. And they do a lot of big shoots. Like, they're super funny, they're super engaging, they're super into it, and they're getting a ton of views. And I guarantee you those ads are only converting within, under 2x. It's highly likely because those are going to have tons of laughs, tons of engagements. But what's happening is if you hit Amazon and you type in, soap, you're going to see probably a white image background with Dr. Squatch right there in the center, nothing else, strong call to action, buy now. And most of the people are going to buy. I've bought in because of this. And I saw those forever. And when I go on Amazon, I'm not tied to one specific brand on soap. But, as soon as I type in, men's soap, bam, and they're the first one showing an ad that's a white background, I've heard of them. I trust them. They're funny. I think they're cool. They talk about all these, earthly things they use, non-chemicals. I'm not a big chemical fan. I don't like the idea of not knowing what's in my soap. So, of course, I'm going to buy. And so that's the beauty of how that works. And it's a huge machine because, one, they're putting the investment up front. Yes, they might be breaking even, but all of these people who've seen it way back or got a good kick out of it are like, hey, at the end of the day, I'll try it out. And that's where the very direct ads come into play. And so you have these basic carousels, these, story ads where it's not even showing them. It's just showing like that tree with the earthy feel. And it's like, here's, Dr. Squatch box with the soap in it. Boom, there's the purchase. but they build up this huge wave of engagements, and then over time they come back and want to convert all these people, and it's very disruptive to any other player in the space because one, nobody's been fronting on such a big level in terms of actually, going big. And you got to think about this too. We have Allbirds who've done it. We've had Purple do it in the mattress space. That space seemed like it was taken over, and Allbirds, you would think that Nike, Adidas, and all these big shoe companies control the area. Allbirds is one of the highest spending advertisers on Facebook, and they're extremely disruptive. And their stuff isn't, super in your face. It's just that they have this explosive power in being able to come up with these super clear marketing messages and spreading it. And they have an incredible feeling shoe. And so it's no surprise that they would be so successful at the same time. But yes, it is pretty insane how fast a company can, seemingly pop up out of nowhere and be so large in an industry that seems so controlled.
There's a couple of points I wanted to raise there. One of them is because you briefly mentioned Tesla, and one memory that I had pulled from my file, which I hadn't thought about in a long time, is I remember, 2000s, I guess end of the 90s, early aughts. The idea of the electric car was not only did it seem impractical, but that there was an active campaign to take these out by the oil companies and basically the automotive industry. So I believe there's a documentary called "Who Killed the Electric Car?"
Yes.
Now I ain't got to see that.
They quite literally killed them.
I didn't even see it.
Took them all and crushed them.
I'm just picturing a Godfather montage where they just snap a few of these in half. Yeah. Now I didn't even see that documentary, but for that title, that alone,
yes,
leaves somebody with a pretty significant impression. I think part of the ability for Tesla to advertise is almost to show this superhuman quality to it, where they're able to get past this automotive industry. This is, we killed those last guys, we'll kill you guys too. And Elon Musk with his flamethrower says, yeah, I got a better idea. But Elon Musk is tied to the advertising of it. He's a personality. People support him. People, well, not everybody, but a lot of people like what he does. He supports a cryptocurrency. Next thing you know, Dogecoin, the memeiest of all of the coins, is now all of a sudden it's massive. It takes off and it comes and it plunges. So that's just a couple of observations that I made from that. And then with just touching on Dr. Squanch one more time, one thing that I find interesting about it is they're working on a pretty significant shift in the culture because the idea of having chemicals on our soap is aside from our own effect on it, just what that must mean about the manufacturing process. And even if I haven't subscribed to it, we'll see by the time this episode comes out, the damage is done. They've already established who the bad guys are, which are all these other soap companies who are all going, frick. And then ironically, they're going into the shower, they're cleaning themselves off. And, there's some dark comedy to that, but they've done their job. And I'm wondering is, if you've had the chance, with your company, with some of the clients you're working with, is have they been able to really deal direct damage in different industries and leave a lasting impression, which ideally converts into profit?
Yeah, there's NDAs with these larger companies, but now there's a big thing going on in a franchise industry where a lot of people aren't getting paid, like McDonald's, Subway, people who have franchises. And so one of the things is, when you have a franchise that has a lot of power, well, that's a big advertising opportunity because their franchisees do get paid. So what they want to do is say, hey, let's, control the narrative here. If people at McDonald's aren't getting, paid and people aren't getting paid at Subway, let's go ahead and, put this to rest and, annihilate a lot of their business by pushing a marketing message where we're actually, going on the offense now that they're, struggling, right? So there's big companies will make big moves like this when they see their opponent is weak. They'll go in and they'll say, hey, now's the time. And we'll come up with these big advertising campaigns to say, hey, we're going to go crush, these guys over this, thing that is going wrong in their business. And why should people not get paid? That's not fair. So it's already a good thing because we're doing something where people are getting paid. So, these advertising campaigns can come in and do massive damage to, their, these other competitive business models and have a really good chance of successfully coming out at a lot more market share. And, we have businesses where we have a business that started with us and they had 50% of a specific market with a, very specific product in the, camping industry. And now we're nearly at 80%. And there's only 3 other people selling the same thing. And we're closing in on these people. And the thing is if we're outspending them, out acquiring them, and gaining all these customers, and we're selling them on our products, well, they're going to stay as a lifetime customer rather than switching. Because if we're offering the same thing at a better cost and we're willing to stay in front of them more often, eventually we're going to drown out the competition. So, there's multiple ways to do it. You can outspend, out acquire, and really dominate the whole area. Because if you're buying all the supply, that's another thing. Going back to Tesla, Elon's now like, hey, I'm not going to be competing with offers here. I'm tired of waiting on these batteries. I'm just going to pay you up front and I'm going to buy everything up front. And then as soon as you get it, you're giving it to me. Rather than saying, hey, I'll buy whatever supply you have, like all these other people. He's paying before he even gets it.
Yeah, he's pre-ordering.
Yeah. So he wants to control the market share. So these other companies will do the same once they grow and get larger. And this can be done in the drop shipping industry. You don't have to be some big elaborate company. I'm talking small guys can come in with the product, outspend their competitors, out market them, out advertise them. Because at the end of the day, if you're selling the same thing, it really does come down to best experience, best customer support, and best creative and best marketing tactics. And if you know how to actually go in there and dominate, give a better offer, and actually acquire a lot of the share and buy up all the supplies, well, nobody's going to want to get on a product if it's going to take 15 to 20 weeks to, order it because you decided to buy all the, product and put it in a warehouse locally. So like there's a lot of things you can do in the dropshipping world to actually take over market share with what seemingly is, a very competitive industry with people using a lot of the same products. So there are ways there can be breakthroughs for small guys. This isn't a big person's game.
Well, no, that's, I mean, it's encouraging for one. I never really thought how much additional benefit I would have, ordering additional product into the warehouse. The ease and of logistics, it being delivered in a smaller time frame is certainly helpful. But the idea of making it more difficult for the competition,
for suppliers, yes,
that's
those guys. That's a new if you're able to, because there's limited supplies they even have, and they have to create it. So like if there's available supplies. If you have a successful product and you're selling a ton of it, rather than only buying the minimum, you could just buy a lot more because it's already selling off the shelves. So why not just load up on it and prevent all these other people from seeing the same opportunity and trying to get a lot more of the product too?
And again, with respect to the so your clients and their privacy, I never want you to feel like you have to answer the question to a degree that you're not supposed to. Because we have some of the results from your website. So these clients, their names are on there. So
sure.
It's not,
Yes.
It blows my mind to see some of the before and after, like 1.55x to 8x, and another is 12x to 70x. That's 70 for those of you listening on on transit. That's pretty massive. So I'd like to, so that's one pillar to the question. The other question, if it is relevant to it, I always ask this question whenever I'm, working with companies or agencies or services, is this idea, of data being aggregated. You collect data from all these clients and you learn lessons, and those lessons can be used to help everybody else out. So with that in mind, if it's relevant, that would be great. But, what has been the cause for some of the most significant return on ad spends to your recollection?
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with an outstanding offer. A lot of times whenever we see these explosive ROAS growth, it's because we came up with a highly enticing offer that is able to capture a ton of people at fractions of a penny of a purchase. Like you got to think of a brand like God is Dope. They sell t-shirts, okay? The thing is, everybody's cost to get a t-shirt right now is anywhere between $25 to $45 to pay for a shirt. And then they have to sell it for a ridiculous amount of money. And then they make super tiny profit. God's Dope's coming in and selling it at $5 and you can get up to 4 shirts for $5. Same quality. How in the world are they able to do that? Well, it's done at scale. So an offer like that, one, it's almost impossible to compete with for anybody because their logistics never make any sense and the profit margin will get annihilated. And two, the shipping time on that is absolutely insane because they have so many people in a impoverished community working with them and they're uplifting their whole community because they have so many sales coming in. So you come in with this $5 buy 4 offer and it has a positive message about God. And, it's lighthearted and it's, going with the whole audience. And there's tons of people who are buying it for literally 2 cents it's costing to acquire a purchase. And, that's already profitable to begin with, very small, but there's profits already built into that because if you're paying 2 cents, I mean, come on, that's an insane offer. And two, You have all these other drops you can do every single week. They can do a new drop, new color, new idea, new spin on something. And they have this massive email base, this massive customer base that already loves their product. And they do the drops at $15, $25, today only, special thing, only one release, limited time. And the profits are insane on how much it explodes, because now you're paying nothing to get to these people, because you're sending one email blast and you're getting, and it's the 30 to 40% of your entire list of purchase. And if you have a couple million of these people on a list, you could only count up the dollars here. It's absolutely insane. So, I mean, a really solid offer will give you crazy ROAS. That's 100x plus ROAS in some cases, So you can see these crazy numbers even at scale. It got so crazy that our CPMs weren't even loading in the ads manager. It literally just had too many zeros because you broke, you actually quite literally look like you broke the algorithm, because Facebook favors an offer and they favor all of these people who are clicking through and buying, because they're like, obviously people love it. We'll push it out more. And if it's so good and it's such a perfect fit and it's such a good offer, they're just going to unleash that thing and it's just going to pace everybody. Whereas, you might be selling a $50 shirt and it's going to cost you $50 CPM just to reach 1,000 people. And then it's going to cost you $45 just to get one of those people to buy. So, I mean, like, it's a hard business model when you're looking at a bad offer. But as long as your offer is great, then you can really have some explosive growth. So those extreme ROAS jumps really come from a solid creative, a solid, message that we know is going to convert with the audience, and then an offer that is just like, unquestionable. I want to do that.
It's been a while since anybody had talked to me, or the God is Dope brand had come into my my radar. But that audience, as large as it is still niche down in a few ways. I mean, for one, I don't really think atheists are going to buy that shirt unless they're being ironic, which is a pretty small part of the atheist community. And then you have people who are religious, and God is Dope to me. It's like, low key, chill, but also Christian. So again, I don't really see the Muslim community wearing that. I don't know if I'm wrong, guys, feel free to let me know. And then you get into the Christian community, and you also have to have a sense of humor, I think, to wear something like that. I think a lot of sects within the Christianity, the different different schools of thought, or the different churches, or the different ways that they're characterized, some of them might not appreciate that. So if you really think about it, there's a pretty, to me at least, there's this pretty specific target market there. And yet, with this selling in bulk strategy, it's still able for them to have massive conversions and be a massive success.
When you get a customer, a lot of people think that that's their final and last one. They don't think that, like, hey, if you put your focus back on the people you acquire, think about like Amazon, one of the largest companies now we have in the US, right? Where people use that every single day. Once you acquire a customer, you can make so much more money just by catering to their needs, by opening up more products, giving them more value. For instance, you sell something under the desk. Well, maybe you sell something that's on top of the desk, or it's a productivity thing, because you find out your entire audience loves to be organized. And now you have this productive calendar that you're now going to release. You don't even have to go find a new audience. Strategy. You can just sell it to the whole, user base you've already created. So launching products or businesses built around your current customers for the needs they have is great, because you've already acquired them. You did the hard part. Lots of people forget that, and they never, do part two to their current base. They're always like, oh, what does this new audience want from us? And they're always trying to find, we want to go in this direction now to sell this product. And then they run out of ideas. But at the end of the day, they could have made way more and had actually a much more happier customer base just by constantly catering to them. The offer gets them in the door. Then you can look at making all your explosive profits on the back end with actually, giving the best value to your customers as possible.
You have to forgive me if this is something that you're not privy to, but I'm just trying to figure this out for my own sake. Is that either when that brand had started and they didn't have the capacity to buy in bulk, they're just they're taking a lot more of a loss early on, but they're trying to establish their brand, so they recognize that it's investment, or B, they actually had a large sum of money to make this large wholesale purchase, and we're actually able to start selling at that higher profit margin.
Yeah, no, this is a pretty incredible story. I mean, the guy was selling these shirts in his high school. So, I mean, like, he was making these at his home and selling them around, and he just saw how much people loved them and was like, I'm going to start, selling these at other schools, and other people were picking it up. And he's like, man, everybody loves this thing. I need to buy a little press machine. I don't know where the story goes from there, but it goes all the way back to the roots of not having any startup capital. You don't need startup capital to launch a business these days. It's just a matter of being able to structure something. You can bootstrap this entire thing, and even if you have a couple $100s, it's still okay, because there's all these free trials you can get these days, and that will get you. You can build up your site, you can build up these themes, you can have all these products in place before you even have any buyers, and then once everything's ready, you can then launch and start selling it with all the model built in. You don't have to start spending all this up front. So, I mean, I wouldn't even advise anybody to go get all this massive supply of anything. You first need to make sure you can sell the thing, and then figure out how to build the back end around that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I myself, I didn't know the history of it, but him starting off selling in high school, I guess technically it's more in category A, selling it and incurring a loss, whatever. But it's not that great of a comparison anyway. So, but I think it speaks to he had an idea and he meant it, and that's one thing that I just think is so important to convey. And ideally, I do that every episode, which is what your brand is. You got to mean it. And one strategy that I think is also key too is, you don't maybe necessarily have to start by selling a product. You can start a brand, start writing a blog, throw some affiliate links in there, try getting some commission off of it, and just start building authority in the space. And, when you're ready to sell a product, you can sell it. And the brand, to me, it's the insurance policy, it's a safety net, but it's also the ability, the fertilizer for something to actually grow.
Yeah, I totally agree. Successful business owners have platforms. They have, audiences built around them. They have solid brands. They have messages that people resonate with, that where those people aren't even necessarily buying from them, but they would love to buy from them if they offered something. They'd love to see their next product. They'd love to see their next service, and they'd love to make those purchases. So if you, have an audience, you have people engaged, and they love you for who you are, and they're always going to support what you're doing. Yeah, you're going to have a much more successful run than somebody who's, has no audience at all and happened to, launch prior to that. So, here's another good thing. If you launch on TikTok and start building an audience there on social media, and then you create your product, that's awesome, because you already have your customer, base pre-established, because you can first sell to them and then find out what they want. And that's the best way to really do it, is to, figure out what people really want and then provide them that.
It's encouraging to hear it coming from you, because, not everybody is working at your level, but, to hear that it goes all the way to, if somebody is just selling t-shirts in high school, they're starting their store up, and they're about to step on the Facebook for the first time. Those pillars remain the same, from point A to point B to point Z.
Absolutely. Yeah. Anybody can do anything right now. You don't have to have any startup capital. It doesn't matter what your background is. It doesn't matter how credible you are. You can build those things. You can build your authority online. And over time, once you, actually acquire that authority, people trust you, then you have an avenue for, catering to their needs. And it's a fantastic way to do it. And it's, the right way to do it. It's not some, get rich quick thing. It's actually sustainable. It's growable. And it's building on layers and foundational pieces that are very structural.
Well, with that, we almost hit an hour mark. And I have to say, I'm just, before we started recording, I related the information that I received to I'm a bucket under a waterfall, and so the bucket definitely was once again filled up with valuable
good to hear
fluid. So I just want to very briefly touch on TikTok just for a couple of seconds here, because I don't really know much about the advertising on TikTok. So for people, I guess, who have the capital or the means and they want to start strategizing on TikTok, what are kind of the key indicators of a good TikTok ad?
You need to be an established brand, I'd say. I don't want to discourage anybody. Anybody can try it. Yeah. I'm not saying don't. I'm just saying that, usually you want to know what your KPI is. You want to know what your break evens are, because you're going to have to spend some money to get it to really work, because you have to have data on their platform. But also, you don't want to make super direct ads. This is actually a reverse. You want to have more TikTok style ads on this platform, because everybody who uses TikTok, they want authentic. They're tired. The noise has overwhelmed them with how direct people have been. And on TikTok, they want to just, be exposed to new creative things. This is your chance to be creative. But you still need that message. The call to action has to be there. People need to know that they can even buy what it is that you're selling. But they need to be TikTok style videos, like influencer type, videos where maybe it's a product review, or it's done in TikTok format, which is having quick, choppy 1 second cuts with, actual wording being shown on every frame, maximizing the amount of views it can actually get. That way, people can be exposed to it, become aware, and then want to purchase when you do show those direct retargeting ads later on. These ads have to be very TikTok oriented. Anybody coming into the space that doesn't think they should, play the TikTok game is badly mistaken on conversions, because you got to play their game, because it's very serious how much the TikTok community likes to see TikTok style videos.
And I think it's also going to be more fun to create content of that. And TikTok is a very specific content platform. Facebook, you go onto Facebook, there's, I don't know what it is, but every time I go onto those, the video section, it's always the same video about somebody getting bullied. And then they come back a week later and they hit the bully with a baseball bat. And it's there's the same video every time. So I don't know what it is about the video section, or maybe it just knows me too well, but all that aside, again, it is encouraging to hear that it's a creative outlet, but in order to have the creative thought process, there has to be things set up in advance. Your brand, your mission, and as much of an establishment as you can muster. So with that, we're gonna wrap this up. This has been a fantastic hour. I'm really, really grateful, really thankful to have had you with us today. If there's any other warnings you want to give us regarding what we were talking about at the beginning, we cascaded into many different things, but anything else you want to leave with us? If there's a stone I forgot to unturn, feel free, and then let the audience know how they can look into more what you're up to.
Certainly no warnings. I think, the quickest way to get started is just by taking action, being willing to test things, being willing to learn, be curious, and actually go through the process. Nothing should ever deter you, no matter how much change is going on in the market. It's just important to pay attention to where those shifts are happening and then adjust with the right information and making sure that you understand what's going on. That way you can better prepare yourself and start low. You don't need to go big on the first day. You can actually start small, get a good understanding. And then once you're comfortable, then you can have some explosive growth and actually try these risky things or do these incredible campaigns. And you've been an incredible interviewer. I've really appreciated it. I've enjoyed this call a lot. And, people can find me on social media on my Instagram, Real Chase Chappell. It's CHASE Chase, and then Chappell is spelled CHAPPELL. My website's also chasechappell.com. I have a YouTube channel. I post, hundreds of free videos, fully transparent. You could see over 200 different client calls of all these different clients we have that I'm consulting with and showing their ad accounts. There's no cutouts. It's all 100% authentic. That way, anybody can see exactly what steps we're taking and, how it is we're actually generating these results. It's not me just talking into a camera. You won't even see me. You're just going to see the ad account and the boring long hour of us making every click, so that way you can watch exactly what made them successful too.
Thank you, by the way, for saying what you said about the interview. I like my audience knows I've been in media for a long time, and this has certainly given me a chance to really, challenge myself and try to put together the best content as I can, respectful of of your time, which is reasonably valuable. So I really do my best, and so it means a lot to hear that. And that's great content to really see the exact work that you guys are doing. So I strongly recommend checking that out. And with that, to my audience, as always, it is an honor and a privilege to be able to collect this information and impart it to all of you, just as much as it has been imparted to me. So take care, and we will check in soon.
But we pay special attention to the products that we share.
Hey, this is Joseph from Ecomonics. Just wanted to thank you for being here and for giving this content your time and attention. I hope you learned something. I can say with certainty, I have learned something with every episode that I have done, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. There's a couple of things you can do to help us out. If you want to check out the audio content, we are available on all major podcast platform distributors. And while you're there, give us a 5-star review. It helps a lot. And while you're here on YouTube, there's a lot of things you can do to help out as well. It's not going to take very long. Subscribe to the channel, hit the like button for this episode, and hit the notification bell so when we have new content for you, it's going to be at your doorstep ASAP. Lastly, this podcast is created by Debutify, the best Shopify template available. It is 100% free for you to start, and it can change your life. It can make you so much more free than you are right now. So if this episode wasn't enough to convince you, I think a few more might do the trick. So have at it.